Have you? Can you hear me, Mr. Ehsan?
Sir, I can hear you. I can hear you.
We're going through a round of introductions. Most of the colleagues here are known to each other, but you are abroad, and I don't know if you know everybody. So we would request you to introduce yourself, and then we can ask the others who.
First of all, sir, thank you a lot for inviting me. There is a personal relationship that I have with you, especially when I with you a lot, because more than anything else, you came over to Karachi to be guest speaker of my book launching ceremony before Russia-Ukraine crisis. Just to introduce myself, I am basically a retired military officer. I've served in the military for 29 years. But then I have civilized and, it's how I look at it that I moved into academics and being part of teaching faculty. Was an NDU teaching there, then I moved over and was teaching in 3 universities in Karachi as a visiting district faculty. And the subject that I was teaching was international relations. I'm also a writer. I would preferably like to introduce myself as a writer because that's what is my passion, and I have been writing in Express Tribune for the last 12 years, I think. I am a Sunday columnist now for the last 4 years, and I keep writing on the subjects related to international relations. I'm an author of 2 books. The third is that I'm writing. Currently, I'm in Russia. I'm part of the Kazan Federal University here, and I gave my postdoctorate in the subject of Pakistan, Russia, China, future partnership alliance, the changing world order. And that's my subject. I will be part of faculty. I'm taking lectures here also. And currently, my assignment is here from where I'm working. So that's
Thank you. Thank you, Ji. We can start from my right, Ji.
Thank you, sir. My name is Lieutenant General Asif Yassin, retired, and I am former Secretary Defense also.
To everybody, Harun Sharif is my name. I'm an economist, mostly specialize on the region and particularly the intercountry, investments.
Assalamualaikum ji. My name is Zafar Nawaz Jaspal. I am professor at the Quaid-e-Azam University School of Politics and International Relations.
Ji, Assalamu alaikum to everyone. I'm Rifat Masood, the retired diplomat ambassador.
Change of name. I'm also a retired diplomat. My name is Tasneem Aslam.
Shahzad Chaudhary, served in the military for some time and have been trying to civilize myself but have failed miserably. So that is that. Yeah. Military is Air Force is military. And so, no, the Air Force is military. Military is a combination of all 3 services. So I also had the opportunity of being the High Commissioner to Sri Lanka for Pakistan for a little while, and currently is try and keep busy. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. I'm Imtiaz Gul, Executive Director for Center for Research and Security Studies. And thank you very much to everybody once again. What I would suggest, Qazi Saab, if we can start with the alphabetical order as well. Asif Saab, I think, is sitting next to you. And on the right.
So he's given the framework.
You know the framework, right?
He's given the framework, and you've also responded partly on that. So so we don't have to.
Thank you. Right side is a question where you are standing, how you look at it. I am on your left side. So God help me. I had sent questions which we can discuss later, but overall about the Middle East crisis and Palestine, I think we have to go to the historical aspect of Palestine as well as Kashmir. Somehow I find them interlinked. And we have been very, very casual on this issue, both Kashmir and Palestine. Some would say we had gone to war and all that, but then that was, since the results were at best pathetic, so that was not also a very serious effort on our part, and wishful thinking was involved in those efforts also, and so we failed. Now, looking at Palestine from Pakistani perspective, I think right from the beginning we have been barking at the wrong tree, and that is the United Nations, which is a big debating club controlled by five crooks of the world. So therefore, we can't find anything constructive coming outside the purview of those countries. And Palestine somehow is not such a big issue overall in the United Nations. It's been so many years, about 70 years, that the problem has been there, and no concrete solution has been made for it. And that is primarily due to the debating club sort of a culture of United Nations. Now, since we didn't have any importance or understanding of the issue, so it was never a focused or a priority stance for Pakistani policymakers. If at all we had a policy, which I doubt, having served in the civilian sphere also and the military also, I don't think so. We have any policy on anything. We are just a Jatka system going on from day to day. Every day there is a policy, and every next day there is a new policy. So since we were not focused, since we probably had lack of understanding also, so one, for example, a disastrous thing that we keep on doing even today is that Israel and Pakistan's, independence or whatever is on a similar plane. They have no equality with each other, absolutely none. But yet our so-called intellectuals and theory makers, they equate Israel and Pakistan, only two countries in the world. And so therefore there's a basic flaw in our understanding. And my view is, if you don't understand, how can you find the right solutions? So that is, I would challenge people in Pakistan. Do we have a Middle East experts here? Do we have Palestine experts here? And that speaks of our intellectual hollowness overall. Are there, for example, we have Qaid-e-Azam University or Punjab University or Jamia Karachi. Is there a system in those universities where they teach foreign policy and they're talking of Middle East? Again, having talked about our own selves, then we look at the world in general, and Muslim world and the Arab world in particular. Right from the, I would say, creation of Israel and the creation of the Palestine problem, the Muslims have been divided, and so have the Arabs been divided, for very petty interests and for maybe very self-centered issues, with no care or concern about the Palestinians, what was happening to them and all that. And so therefore, if the immediate effectees were not bothered about it, we were the far effectees. How could we be bothered? हमारी सेहत पे क्या फर्क पड़ रहा था? Hardly any. So जिनकी सेहत पे फर्क पड़ रहा था, वो अपने अपने तूती बजा रहे थे, and they were following their own concerns, if at all they were. So therefore, so much for the national policy and national understanding. Since it is muddled, so we cannot have a clarity of making the future. And all this poor stance makes us, showing us lack of clarity in all the various aspects of the Israeli crisis. And now that comes us to 7th of October this year. Were we expecting it? Were we prepared for an all-out war between Hamas and Israel? And I can challenge, even now that war is not being critically evaluated by our concerned people, just like I would equate it with what is happening in Ukraine also. We have hardly any interest, specific military political interest in the Ukraine war. It is almost right. So BBC, well, good for them. But my point is that we absolutely lack that intellectual depth and the understanding. And that is because we stand sort of, we are lost in our own, gham or khushiyan, or we have hardly any time to have focus on Ukraine. If I was somewhere, the moment the Ukraine crisis started, we could have a Ukraine cell only working day and night on Ukraine and working out possibilities and probabilities. And same goes for 7th of October. We could have had, a, a focused organization briefing the prime minister or whatever, the system is availing. So that is where we stand. And I don't think so we are going anywhere. Thank you.
Harun Sahab. So you
I picked up my questions. Well, thank you very much. A couple of thoughts to begin with. When we say that, we haven't really looked into the profound or not too profound changes in the global scene or the regional scene over the years, as somebody who looks at economic policy as an entry point, I think couple of changes in Pakistan and also wider region and globe are very evident over the past few years. First change is that short-term commercial transactional interests have really trumped the morality or values or what we call rationality in the leadership of most countries, if you come to think of it. Remember when this mortgage crisis came in the US and the big firms got, the too big to fail. So there was no equality or morality or people centric thinking there. And I think we have been in denial, as somebody said, for several years, but we have been pretending that that's not the case. I'll move that to the Arab world, how they operate. You know, they have accumulated lots of wealth by selling oil over the years. Now they know that the oil production will not be the main revenue earner in the medium term. They are maximizing their wealth by hook or crook. So at this point in time, the money they burnt their fingers in the COVID time because 95% of their assets were in the West and were in the real estate. Real estate, particularly hoteling, went down. And Arabs basically then say, aha, so we are not making money what we wanted to make, so we need to diversify. And that is the time when Saudi Vision 2030 and other things started coming into place, where they thought that, oh, South Asia also exists as an opportunity and others exist, but still they are putting a very little sum here. Mostly the money they have, the distinction I'm making, which I think our policymakers are, and that's linked to this question. uh, the money they have at the moment is purely for short term commercial gains. It's through their sovereign wealth funds. It's neither development, it's not to help a country, it is a transactional nature of business. The other change, somebody who works in the region I've seen over the years, is that Arabs, traditional historical relations within the region, they also became subservient to commercial deals. And Israel's basically influence over, several Emirates and even some other individual Saudi businessmen has gone up several folds over the years because they are offering them big commercial deals together. And the way the decision making in that world happens, there are few people who actually control most of the policy thing, if you say. So now this commercial dynamic, you see the response of UAE, for instance. Zero response practically to this whole conflict because at this point they just don't afford commercial transactions to be hit. Saudi response is different because Mohammed bin Salman has to build a constituency. He has far too many enemies within Saudi Arabia for reform. He has to listen to some of the voices, you know. So response is mixed, but still dominated by medium term commercial deals, which they have already agreed upon in the region. Now that's a major shift from what the way we used to look at so-called OIC and others, in the past. And they're looking at Pakistan and Bangladesh and India and others from the same lens. Wherever we can make money, we'll go, and wherever our money is secure. Now, coming to the BRI challenge in 1 minute, because this is linked to it. So, on one side, somebody was looking at commercial transactions, whereas China, the way they operate, they also have transactions, but they have much longer term of patience to materialize it. And they also have some thinking going on how they want to look at BRI countries. And now they have given a global development initiative and the security initiative. So an emerging superpower which is challenging, the world. And then came G20, where suddenly another idea was floated. People took it very serious. Some people, media took it very serious. Michael Kugelman tweeted immediately that CPEC is gone and there's a new thing which has come up. So when I was talking to somebody in Beijing, and there was a very interesting comment they made. They said, "Oh, fine. So they want to make trains and ports and roads. Have they ever thought that who can build it in the world?" Now, that's a very serious question. None other than China can actually build that infrastructure in today's world. Who has the expertise? So he said, this means more business for us, I presume. So all I'm trying to say is that these whole ideas are a media driven war, basically to influence the mindsets. There's no money behind it. There's nothing. Now this conflict, how will it, Arabs, in my experience, are divided on China. Some actually see it's a long term technology partner to the Arab world, and they actually see a separation with the US over the 15, 20, 25 years, not now. Some are worried that China is so powerful that that will hit our sheikdoms, that will hit our assets. So the people who are thinking personally, they are a bit insecure. The people who are thinking a bit countrywide or institutionally, like Qatar and part of Saudi Arabia, they actually see privately China as a long term partner. And I think the people who have created this conflict are aware of that very clearly. Now, this conflict in Middle East, if you look at that, and I'll close here, I think in the post-oil Arab world, neither they have the technology nor they have the manpower indigenously, and they were actually looking at regional players like Israel and others to help them. Some of them. I think that dynamic in the bigger Arab worlds after this war has changed. China's position is loud and clear. I spoke to Chinese diplomats this morning before coming here. That at least your voice is neutral. They said, no, we are not neutral. We have a position, and we have a very clear position that this aggression must stop. We are not taking a middle ground. So I think if the people's sentiment in Saudis and others pushes people like MBS to have a rethink, there would be perhaps more openings towards China in future, not the West. But for the time being, I don't see little countries like UAE and others. They might have some wealth, but they are tiny little emirates. They are now indebted to that tie-up, and I don't think they can break away. And Pakistan needs to very carefully look at that angle, because our political elite has deep investments in UAE, and UAE basically after London, frankly, half of our political elite works in the UAE, and let's be open about it. So we need to look at that address. Yeah, the working elite. Gee, elite, all of elite, but visibly political elite. And the second part, basically on reforms, I think all these countries, particularly Saudi Arabia, is massively reforming. And my personal interactions with MBS, what he told me was that if I survive for 20 years, and he was very clear, I would like to see Saudi Arabia, which is actually has a foundation of science and technology, not oil. Now, that's a massive dream for any young man. He was 34 at that time, now will be 36 or 37. Now, these reforms cannot be implemented if MBS has people support, because he has enough enemies within Saudi Arabia. So he will go by people's sentiment on this conflict. That's my understanding is, rather than being pressurized by West and others only. And other than, I don't think we should take this G20 announcements and others seriously. It will take another 30 years if they are serious at all. And China's question, who will build it, is a very valid question.
Arun Saab, thank you very much. I think you've highlighted the economic angle very much. Commercial and heavily among the economic, heavily the commercial angle. And obviously, they're looking at the future, how to retain their primacy in terms of money and so on and so forth. Now we'll ask Mr. Ehsan, to give his comments. The framework already Mr. Imtiaz has clarified. I needn't re-emphasize that. And we'd like to pass on to you to be able to take any points that you wish to.
Also, I think more maybe about the geopolitics, how the current wave of violence, starting from Israel up to the other parts of the Middle East, is geopolitics redefining the way of engagement, and what does it mean for the United States, for China, and for Russia? Thank you. मोहम्मद अली, आप बोलें, आपको हमने माइक दे दिया है.
Sorry, sir. What's the question? I'm sorry.
अच्छा, आपने तो क्वेश्चन आप अपने भी किए होंगे, लेकिन हम वैसे ही पूछ रहे थे कि how would you look at the geopolitics, the evolving geopolitics, and where does it leave big powers like the United States and China?
And the viewpoint from Moscow. Moscow view.
I think there is a big requirement of changing the mindset. The way that the conflict is shaped up, I think बहुत ज़्यादा it is being way to understand how maybe it's a war between civilization or good and evil or humanity versus animals, all that kind of talk that is taking place. I think that is taking it away from any possibility of solution. At the heart of this, sir, I think जो सबसे बड़ा important element है वो जो unlimited power the United States is utilizing. I think that is leading to two very big problems. And one is that how it is difficult for US to convert this power into influence. The more the world is divided, the less influence US has to really come forward and push around some kind of influence. The second problem is in how everything that US
on
needs to do as a role hedgehog is related to how it is trying to follow its own interests or interests of its own partners in terms of Middle East and how it is trying to look after the interests of Israel. So that is creating a lot of division. But then again, it's not only the military dimension of the power that is there. The economic dimension is still अभी काफी लोग बात नहीं कर चुके हैं. But I am convinced that geoeconomics, which is the buzzword with all the Gulf and Arab countries these days, geoeconomics can never prosper or move forward unless there is some way that you solve the geopolitics. And that is something that this current issue of Gaza has brought forward and reminded us. So if it is just about military power or economics, so I think more than that, there is a third element also, that is transnational relationships. उसके अंदर the non-state actors like Hamas and Hezbollah and others, those that are in Syria, the proxies of Iran, all of them also matter a lot, and उनको control करना जो है, it is very difficult. And 7th October, everybody has his own way of looking at it. So I look at it from the point of view of those three national security strategies. जो US presidents ने, Obama ने, Trump ने और Biden ने. मैं Biden से the reverse order आपसे सिर्फ एक कहना चाहता हूँ that there is the word unprovoked was used by Biden in his national security strategy for the war in Ukraine. I think it's absolutely a lie, because the way that they have really pushed Russia to the war, for it to really respond in the way that it has done. So it was not an unprovoked war. Today I was listening to the speech of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and he again used the same word. He said that the action by Hamas was unprovoked on Sunday. It was not unprovoked. I think the way that the power has been utilized by these powerful countries, everything is getting provoked. There is these middle power countries, जिनमें बहुत सी countries of Gulf and Saudi Arabia की शामिल हैं. But then their problem is that all of them are today seeking opportunities more than seeking any kind of alignment, and they are drawing themselves away from those thick, hardcore ideological goals जिन पे के Middle Eastern politics पहले चलती थी, and they are no more bothered about that, because they're all like the great trend in today's fashion in the world is about hedging. Everybody is trying to just work out the opportunities that they'll be able to cash on. The more they stay quiet, and we have heard from Benjamin Netanyahu again said that if you keep silent, that's the minimum thing that you can do. He called the other point and said that, because he knows the kind of situation in which they have combined together, US and Israel, and brought the Arab world. There is no the response that we heard from how the OIC meeting was held. It was just condemnation, and nothing could be done. We know that the resolution will not be binding, whichever resolution will be passed, but at least the meaning that they could see in building some pressure by withdrawing some diplomats, getting out of Iran accords, something like that. But that they will not do if we understand in terms of how their future. If you're thinking of building the greatest city in the world in terms of neon, where there will be no highways, no roads, no pollution. There will just be high-speed trains and an opportunity to travel to space, other things. That's the mind where the Saudis are thinking. It's not a mind that is grounded in the Middle Eastern hardcore politics, in which they needed to first figure out how the Israelis are going to benefit from this economic great rewards that they are sharing with that through Abraham Accords. So I think so. There is one thing that President Obama mentioned in his national security strategy, and that was about leadership. And that word leadership in his national security strategy is figured out about 28 times, and he laid a lot of emphasis on that. And I think the big problem today, everywhere, is about the leadership. If you're looking at a solution of this problem, I think unless we have a change in leadership in Palestine, unless we have a change in leadership in Israel, unless we have a change of leadership in America, we will not have a solution that we are looking for, because at the end of the day, all of us would want to see where would this war would lead to, where would it end, and if as a good strategist, as a good visionary leader, you're not already looking at an end, then this war will mean violence, and more of that as the time passes by. What on the Arabs? I think the Jordanians and the Egyptians, they are more involved in their own problems, socio-economic problems, and they are looking at how Europe got a lot of refugees and had that. But they're not looking at Palestinians from the point of view of a matter that needs resolution, from the point of view of how they might have influx of refugees. So they are not going to raise their hand. Gulf states, I've already talked about the ambitious economic development projects they are looking at and how they are likely to lay down low. Iran, I think I wrote a piece on that also, and I wrote that basically Gaza is the big fish that the West wants to catch is Iran. And again, everything is being done to provoke Iran, but since there's a lot of deployment of military machines, platforms, everywhere, America, and I think Iran would go as much as utilizing its proxies of Hezbollah and others in Syria and other places and not directly get into the conflict, because again, it looks at what can happen to it as a country. So, currently the world is involved in the short-term goal of preventing the expansion of this war, how to end it maybe, and getting the humanitarian aid inside Gaza. But for me, I think the most important thing is to get down and think about a two-state solution that was always there through the Oslo Accords. I also heard about somebody, I'm sorry, I can't see who are the participants sitting, but I heard the first participant talking about how there is no expert on Middle East here, which I think I absolutely agree. हमारी सबसे बड़ी deficiency है that we are, master of all everywhere and jack of all trades and master of none. That kind of a situation. We do need specialists in all the subjects who could really speak about that. हमारे universities की भी आपने बात की and talked about how there is dearth of that. But मैं एक word कहना चाहूँगा. There is a new trend of how we have the vice chancellors of the university being appointed, ex-generals being appointed there. That's the trend that I saw it. I saw it in NDU. I saw it at another university that I went and resigned and came out from it. I think we need to understand that a PhD general, a general with a PhD at the end of his career almost is not a PhD that can really do anything for benefit for the country. So specialization का जितना हमने करनी है हमें यूनिवर्सिटीज में इन्वेस्ट सिर्फ स्टूडेंट्स पे नहीं करना है, हमें फैकल्टी पे भी करना है और हमें अपने बड़े डिसीजन मेकर्स पे भी करना है जो कि एकेडमिकली क्वालिफाइड और प्रोसेस से गुजर के आए हो. I think unless that happens, and मेरे लिए the change in Pakistan's policy and that was under discussion, अगर कभी आएगी और आनी चाहिए वो हमारी यूनिवर्सिटी से आएगी. वो मेरी तरह या बहुत से ऐसे लोग जो मतलब कुछ लिख लेते हैं या बात कर लेते हैं से नहीं आए. They will come from those children that will really जिन्हें हम opportunities अच्छी करने के लिए. That's all that I need to say.
Ehsan Sahab, thank you very much for your insightful comments. Yeah, we were expecting some comments from you, the viewpoint from Russia. How do you see it? Because everybody feels here that they've not come out very openly, and obviously they're involved in a war, with Ukraine and the West. So we would like to hear your viewpoint with regard to the Russian perceptions.
Sir, I think President Biden has, I would call it a mistake. Why? Because there are three trigger of operation, and all of us were sitting here in August gathering, all of us know that. It's not only Ukraine, the Eastern Europe, it's not only the Western Pacific, where China is there, it's now Middle East. So one of the things that Obama wanted, the American administration was to not to be, get involved in expanding, in moving out, overreach नहीं करना. But I think that's what
recording in progress.
And as far as the Russians are concerned, I think, sir, the counter-offensive is badly gone wrong. To we have already seen how the Congress has stood up and said we are no more going to fund this war because it has given no results. And again, there is this talk of corruption also in how Ukraine, all this that is going in, there is no accountability of where it is. Maybe there is talk about how much of the weapons have ended up back in the hands of those who are fighting in Gaza. So nobody's sure about this American agenda of fighting this war with this alliance with partners. I am convinced that the Russian is a great land power, like the Chinese. They are both the great land powers, and it's great balance of power concept that is there. The time of unipolar world is over in terms of how America has made grave mistakes, and the more overstretched it is today, the more problems for it will go. Russia does have problems economically. I am here, and I do look at everything that's. I go to the markets, I meet the people, I talk to the students in the universities. But sir, there is the sense that I get that they will come out of this. There are two reasons for that. One, that the revenue that is there, that they generate is through their oil and gas. And today, just take the example of India. 50% of the oil going to India today is from Russia. Similarly, take the example of Brazil. All the trade that was taking place, it has grown twice the amount of in numbers that it was taking place before the war. And in terms of its relationship with Turkey also, where it has set up a nuclear power plant, and Erdogan just recently said that he'd be interested in getting 2 more nuclear power plants established. So it has its own ways of managing its economics. And the हालात इतने बुरे नहीं हैं जितने बाहर दुनिया में हैं. So that's another thing that I would like to point out here. When you are there and not here, then you realize maybe because there's so much Fox News, CNN, BBC, everybody's telling you that as if everything has gone wrong here. I don't find that kind of situation. And I think this no limits partnership between China and Russia, this is something that the world fears, but the Western world I am talking about. When we talk about the global south and we talk about those who have been colonized, those who have a different way of looking at how this world has been, this order of liberal internationalism has been very unjust. I think they look up to this partnership and they look up to both these countries to stand up and not challenge the world order. I think there cannot be another world order in say next few years or a decade or so, but there is going to be an alternative order. An alternative order which will challenge this just way this order is trying to freedom, liberal internationalism, where you find no liberty and no protection of human rights and everything. Gaza is a perfect example of that. And I think that is how the African countries and Latin Americans also, Asian countries also, yes, few of them are currently hedging, but most of them are just waiting for the time when there's time for this big change. One quote from Russian president, which I like and I would like to quote here, and he says that you can either be a sovereign or you can be a colony. And I absolutely agree with it. And being a colony doesn't mean that you have to be really physically colonized. They colonize and they are standing up and fighting for it. Over 11,000 are dead, and I know how many would be further killed. But they are standing up and fighting. But there are countries that we know who have allowed themselves to be colonized. But you do not get colonized because physically this liberal internationalism ki jo बहुत से tribals including IMF, World Bank, other loans, aid, other things, that's how they just kind of string you your economy and then make you take decisions that are not sovereign decisions. And I think that is what is different in the countries that Americans want perfect, and they call this war between autocracy and democracy. That's how they say it. I think those autocratic countries have their own political system, but as long as those systems are giving it back to the people what they deserve, and the things are moving forward, they will continue to stand up and challenge. Russia today is quite hands and gloves with Iran. It's really their foreign minister was there currently. It supports Iran. Iran banks on them a lot, but I don't think so. There's going to be an escalation of war in terms of how the big powers get involved and maybe push Iran to do something silly. I think that is not what I'm seeing is happening. Iran would continue to use its proxies to do what it is doing. Similarly, Russia has taken this war into a stalemate, and it is perfectly all right for it to sit where it is sitting behind the Libya River, entrenched, and the Ukrainians do not have the military power to do anything about Russia at this stage. And with the aid also, the Congress challenging it, some of the European countries even questioning it, I think we are looking at a war. It's political goal. There's another element of understanding who this political goal he America. I can just narrate 10 political goals that Americans came out for fighting this war. But unless you have a solid one big political goal that is achievable, you will not see the end correctly. And I think Americans, the problem in Ireland has just made this world very violent. Every necessary war that they have fought has been something that has not been able to achieve anything for them. And Gaza is another example of Middle East.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ehsan. I think some of your comments are really very on spot, particularly the way the Arab leaders are thinking of the future and the fact that the oil is going to lose its strength and the investments they're making. And the other point you raised is the propaganda that the West carries out about the former Soviet Union, Russia, that affects the thinking all over the world. And when you go to Russia, you see the other side, which balances the outlook. So thank you very much for your comments. I'll now invite Mr. Shahzad Chaudhry for his viewpoint and comments.
Thank you, sir. I wish to frame it differently, a little my few comments, and I want to basically hypothesize why Gaza has taken place in the context of our geopolitics and the existing environment, and then try and see what are the possible ways out, or what are the difficulties that the world, or at least the Gazans, are facing. I'd like to begin with the changes in the US policy that we may have discerned over the last some decades, or maybe at least one decade. And foremost of those has been that the US has critically and particularly focused on keeping its alliance with the NATO, reinforcing that alliance with the NATO. And this was something that went missing during the times of Trump, and Trump was Make America Great Again. Biden, ever since he came, has obviously been focusing on that. The other element or the alliance that they have actually focused on, they want to reinforce and re-strengthen that and bring it back into the frame, is Israel, the relationship with Israel. So these two perhaps are the most critical interests that the US foreign policy currently pursues, NATO and Israel. And they want to make sure that the geographic domains of NATO especially are retained, and the threat that they find from Russia, whether in Ukraine or anywhere else, is of course checked. That is their basic interest. Now, one more interest can be contained, of course, brought about, and they've stated that very clearly, and they see that as a threat, is containing China in different ways and means. But yes, that is also one of the aspects. I don't think containing Russia for them is a big problem. Russia is now a par there to see, but we tend to conflate too much of Russia and China together to pose the second front, so to say, in the geopolitics of the world as the global politics emerges. To my mind, Russia remains and plays second fiddle to China in the foreseeable future. I don't see Russia making that kind of an impact on the global scene where it can unilaterally either threaten or disturb the balance of the world as it exists today. There are some tertiary interests also. So when the US wants to actually pursue these interests, it must do some other things. And those other things are outsourcing the responsibility of the rest of the world to countries that they think can take over that responsibility. And Israel figures very importantly in that, especially their initiative where they've made Israel create relations with the Muslim nations. And so that was an initiative that obviously was meant to bring about solid footing for Israel within the Muslim world. That was a very important part. And I think they've tried to do that. They've done it very successfully. and amongst at least in some of the nations. As far as the control over the near Middle East is concerned, and in that, then we look at China, Pakistan, Iran, etc. Iran, of course, figures out very prominently. And containing BRI in terms of China's interest, I don't think is a very key trigger. It's just going to be derivative benefit if it ever emerges like that. So this strategy to outsource to other people is perhaps the main driver or the trigger of what you see happening in Israel or in Middle East in terms of the Gazan war. Israel's relations with Saudi Arabia are the key to making the entire Muslim world follow the footsteps of Saudi Arabia. And they understand that's the center of gravity. If they can somehow manage that center of gravity and make it happen for Saudi Arabia and for Israel, then Israel has almost a good amount of impact in the Middle East. And we keep in mind, and this we discuss how Saudi Arabia wants to move on from Orientalism to a more progressive and developmental socio-economic system. So when you look at that, then obviously the country, they need support from everybody, China inclusive, but by not Israel. And Israel can be very relevant in that sense in terms of providing that agriculture and technology and that kind of innovation that is needed in what MBS kind of people want to look at in terms of Middle East. So that is the key, joining Israel and Saudi Arabia together. Now, if Saudi Arabia must come into that fold with Israel and create that breakthrough for the rest of the Muslim world, like Pakistan and Indonesia and rest of the countries to also follow suit and create a relationship of some kind. We're holding on actually, thinking of one day when Saudi Arabia recognizes Israel, and probably will follow suit immediately after or sometime after. But anyway, so that is the key. Now, for that to happen, if that ever happens, it will grant the freedom of action for Israel to not only be economically most dominant, it also will be, obviously, along with that, militarily as well as in terms of politically dominant there. And that piece of the land, which we call Middle East, can then be handed over to Israel, and Israel effectively takes up the responsibility that the US has till date done. Saudi Arabia needs a peaceful environment for itself to grow. And what is it that bothers Saudi Arabia? I think Iran bothers Saudi Arabia the most at this point of time. And what are the tenets of Iran that exist in the world? There is Hamas, there is Hezbollah, there are the Houthis. Then, of course, Saudi Arabia would like to have some sort of a Palestinian situation, solution, so that it can take it to the world and say, look, I didn't just give in to the Israeli or the American demands. Actually, I have provided something or delivered something to you in terms of the Muslim world in getting a Palestinian state. So two-state solution is also part of Israel making a comeback into the Middle East. And however, for that to happen, Iran must be checked in its own shoes. And its spread and its influence must be taken care of. That brings me to the point why or how Hamas may have been provoked into doing what it did, and then starting a possibility of creating a situation where Israel is going to war with Hamas. When will it finish? I think when Israel and the US think, or Saudi Arabia think that Hamas is not totally eliminated. Will it also mean getting Hezbollah into it? Yes, they're trying their best to get Hezbollah somehow involved so that they can do two in one. And not only Hamas, but Hezbollah can also be taken care of. And that will lower the weight of Iran considerably in the world. If that can happen, Saudi Arabia can rest peacefully, and they can find that particular liberty of action or freedom of space where they can actually try and develop the way that MBS envisages. Iraq and Syria have been taken care of in so many ways, and so that influence of Iran has also been catered for. As we know, Turkey was invited into Saudi Arabia to ameliorate, a lot of that Muslim sentiment. Similarly, Syria was recently also in Iran, in Saudi Arabia. So that to me is how the entire thing comes out. Now I come to the final point about the two-state, because that also is going to be delivered by Saudi Arabia through or on behalf of Saudi Arabia. And how, to my mind, it emerges is, and I've written about it in a few pieces that I do write sometime. It is in the shape of the West Bank actually being the Palestinian state. and not Gaza. Now, this might happen incrementally and not right away. It will not be one blow solution to everything. But half of Gaza is gone. The Israelis are going to stay there for a while, and the rest half will gradually be reduced to assimilation within the Israeli territorial identification. That makes Israel a much more geographically defined space, much more easier to defend militarily as well as politically. So, to my mind, if not today, in 20 years, 15 years, 25 years, the Gazans the remaining Palestinians in Gaza might say, enough for us, and we like to now spread out, unfortunately, as Israelis have been spread for so many decades in their history in the past. That might happen. Or what they could do is that they could create the West Bank as the enclave, the Palestinian state, and ask Palestinians or ask the West Bankers to try and get them in. Who all want Hamas reduced considerably or totally? It includes the Palestinian Authority as well. So look at the dynamics, how they are all, to my mind at least, they keep merging up, and how it all seems to be getting together. And finally, once when this two-state solution is delivered, it shall be in the US under Biden, with Mr. Netanyahu on one side, and with the Palestinian Authority on the other side, maybe by the presence of MBS also in that frame of picture, and you will have peace delivered to the world by the hands of these 3, 4, 5 people. In the meanwhile, of course, the collateral will continue to happen. The Gazans or the Palestinians will keep dying. The children will keep dying. The women will keep dying, which is simply collateral damage in my sense. But what that does to Mr. Biden, it gives him a trophy 4 months short or 6 months short of his elections, which he is at the moment in his ratings bound to lose. So if this can be delivered to him just as OBL was delivered to Mr. Obama, I think that makes the story. That is how I have to hypothesize it. So I don't know how many will agree, but that is what I think is happening. Thank you.
Shahzad Sahab, thank you very much, particularly your extrapolation as to how do you see this as an opportunity for the United States and for Israel to bring about a solution to the Palestinian issue in desire with their wishes. But of course, I think there's many a slip between the cup and the lip. The general feeling, the articles that I've read, is that you can neutralize Hamas, but you cannot totally eliminate them because it's an idea and it has roots in religion and on the what has happened to them over the years, the denial and the sufferings that they've gone through. So that's a factor to be taken into consideration. But the Arab world is so divided, and the Abraham Accords have also brought about more change, that they are not the 5 or 6 countries like Saudis, the UAE, Morocco, Sudan. They are just not prepared to take any punitive measures in the resolution, the declaration that the OIC and Arab League passed. So that
just add a little bit to this, if you permit. I know it's very difficult for us here as Muslims and Pakistanis to really digest this kind of a hypothesis. But you got to be a believer to believe in what you say. And I have, over the last 7 decades of my life, realized that belief is a good thing in certain parts of your personal life, but this world operates very differently. And what we have seen and what we have noticed, ideologies, idealism, beliefs, are actually trumped at the altar of what we might call short-termism, medium-termism, that sort of thing. Maybe to some long-termism in terms of how the world is structured in the future or stabilized in the future. It's a very interesting thing. I must share this with you. I was watching a podcast by someone in the US who's a professor of course, politics, and he is a recent Muslim convert as also. And so he was, opining on the Gazan thing, and he felt that the entire world thinks that Netanyahu has gone rogue, and basically he needs to be quietened down and neutralized so that peace can prevail, and everyone is looking for peace so that Saudi Arabia And the rest of the world, including the US, can actually go on and develop the way they want the economies to develop. So there is the flip side of it, where they look at the present Israeli government as the rogue government, but they are all looking towards the same end: economic benefit and how it will transpose itself in the coming world. Quite interesting.
Thank you very much, Shahzad Chaudhry Sahab. We keep reading your articles, and it's been delightful to hear you today for the first time. May I ask our distinguished colleague, Ambassador Rifat Masood, for, well, I've been asked
No,
by
it's up to you if you're ready or whoever. जी जी वो
Yes.
इधर ज़हीर है माइक।
So,
नहीं शहजाद साहब चूंकि सबसे पहले आ गए थे, तो इसलिए हमने कहा कि इनको ज्यादा इंतजार नहीं करना। ये डिस्क्रिमिनेशन
हाँ
दोनों फौजी पहले हो गए।
मिलिट्री के आगे हम सरनगू हो जाते हैं ना।
so the two distinguished ladies can decide among
No,
themselves.
it's okay. It's okay. It's fine. Thank you very much. बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया, and it's a very timely conversation that we are having. It's interesting.
Spell out what you are going to focus on.
Well, yes, I'll do that. So October, if we sort of, because I've just come from a history lesson. I had an hour's history lesson from no less than the Prime Minister of Pakistan. So, you know. So October is a very, very significant month. October 1973 was the Arab-Israeli War. 6th October, actually. 6th October. Yes. Yom Kippur, the Israelis call it. October 7, 2001 was US invasion of Afghanistan. And October 7, 2023 is the Hamas. Now, so it's very significant vis-a-vis the United States. And I've heard colleagues, of course, around the table, and I tend to agree with quite a bit of what they've said, but not everything. So I will just add my little piece. I will talk, since my last posting was in Iran as the ambassador, and I have studied and examined Iranian society more than anything else. I'd like to talk about that, the role Iran plays and the importance of Iran in this region, which we tend to somehow ignore. We ignore it because we don't have knowledge, as General Saab was saying. We don't understand Iranians like we should. And we also don't understand the Arabs like we should. You know, I mean, I agree with you on that totally. But the fact is that because we don't understand both of these two nations, Arab and Ajam, we will suffer in the end because of it, because of our lack of understanding. And we have not been able to capitalize the way we should have. In this region, we could have benefited. I don't see how you know, playing one against the other really benefits us. It doesn't. I mean, we can work with both. We have done it in the past. We can do it. I don't see what the problem is. But anyway, that's our policymakers. They decide what they want to do. The US, of course, we have all said that they have been losing ground. They have seen that they've been losing ground to China and how China is coming up and all that. But when it comes to Iran, I think I'm sorry, with respect to my senior colleague Shahzad Chaudhry Sahab, we work together. You know, it's not as simple as, I mean, economics is very, very important, of course. It is, money matters, especially for the Arabs. But it is short term, as you say. Iran, actually, if we look at this present situation in Gaza, that why it happened and how it has happened, the background is the slow movement by some of the Gulf states towards Israel, inclination towards Israel. The slow movement of Iran and Saudi Arabia to start talking about, I'm not saying that they're engaging, but they are talking. They have signed an agreement and they are planning at some stage to move forward. So slow movement of this region, I would say the Middle East and Gulf region, to sort of take on a life of its own with the help of China and Russia, and leaving the United States a little behind. That's where the Abraham Accords come in. The Abraham Accords were a wake-up call to the Iranians, because one thing I would like to clarify here, that for Iran, Shaitan-e-Buzurg is America, and Shaitan-e-Kuchik is Israel. And I think probably I wouldn't be wrong in saying that it's when hell freezes over that Iran will actually move towards any kind of recognition, any kind of rapprochement, any kind of even conversation with the Israelis. I mean, it is this, they're just so clear-cut in that. And I'm not talking about the Irani policymakers. I'm talking about the people, because for them, this is very clear. And, this happened gradually. I mean, I just like to also take you back into history, that when the 79 revolution took place, relations with Israel were not immediately cut off. Iran and Israel had a very robust relationship. During the Shah's time, of course, it was very strong, but it continued. It only broke off when the hostage crisis in the US crisis happened. And the Iranians then decided that, okay, if the US is going to work with Israel, we're not. So it wasn't, they have a huge Jewish population there. It's a minority, but it's a very influential minority. And all these factors play in. And Iran looks at itself as a very, very sort of civilized and a very sort of cultured, and they are proud of their history. Their culture, their heritage comes first, the religion comes second. This is very important to know. So in keeping all this in view, I think that what happened in Gaza and whatever Israel is doing, it's not going to stop there. This is my view. Because Israel's target is not Saudi Arabia. Israel's target is not Jordan. Israel's target is not even Syria. Israel's target is not the Arab countries. Israel's target is Iran. And unless and until they are able to somehow subjugate, subdue, cripple, whatever adjective you want to use, Iran, they're going to stop. So Gaza, yes, of course, Hamas played out, and they may try to bomb as much as they want, but I tend to agree with Ambassador Kazi Hamayoun that eliminating Hamas is not going to be easy. It's probably an impossible task, because again, it's an ideology, It's very difficult to deal with ideologies. And Iran, yes, supports Hamas full force. The Hamas representative in Tehran is as important as any diplomat. He goes to all the functions, he's recognized there. हमारे स्कूल में बच्चे उनके मुफ्त पढ़ते हैं, हम उनसे फीस नहीं लेते हैं. This is our little contribution to the Palestinian cause. हमारा ये कि जो पाकिस्तानी एम्बेसी का स्कूल है, उधर हमास के बच्चे और हिजबुल्लाह के बच्चे जो है ना, उनकी फीस माफ होती है. चल रहा है उनका. So, but what I'm trying to say is that they are. अच्छा, फिर ईरान के अलावा there is Qatar also. Qatar also has a very, very strong support base for Hamas. And then let's not forget Oman, which is a black horse, I think, in all this, because Oman also has a lot of influence. And then Yemen, of course, with the Houthis and all. तो मेरे कहने का मकसद ये है कि ये जो शुरू किया है इजराइल ने, ठीक है, गजा को हो सकता है they will bomb them out, क्योंकि अब तो almost they have bombed them. गजा उसको तो निकाल दिया, एक नकबा शुरू हो चुका है तकरीबन. But they will not stop at West Bank. ये two-state solution, I think, sir, it was maybe could have happened then, but now I think it's going to go much, much further than that. I mean, अब तो वो कहेंगे कि नहीं ना, फलस्तीनियों, वो तो खुश हैं, वो कहते हैं फलस्तीनी दूसरे मुल्कों में चले जाएं. Why are they staying in? Why? Even the Arab countries are happy that Palestinians should go to Europe and Palestinians should go to Asia. वो वहाँ पे migrate कर दें, हमारे पास भी ना के. So, and they are going to keep moving eastwards until they get to Iran, because the Iranian nuclear program is targeted towards them, and they know it. And I'm afraid that even the Westerns, although the US has no embassy or no representation in Iran, but the Europeans do. And if you all visit Iran, at some point in your lives, you will see that Iran, despite its 44 years of sanctions, despite the fact that they are not allowed to sell their oil and gas, it is a high-end developing country. I mean, the infrastructure in Iran is as good as any in the Arab countries that I've visited. Acha, because they have been doing it clandestinely. Chalo ji gas or oil apna bech rahe hain. Iran, China is buying it, Russia is buying it, India is buying it, everybody's buying it, you know. Even the Europeans would like to buy it. वो तो उनको अमेरिका ने हाँ हम तो हाँ हमारा तो और मेरा तो हारून साहब के साथ पुराना वैर है ना इस बात पे, क्योंकि मैं जब सफीर थी उधर मैं आई थी, इनसे ये BOI को हेड करे थे, मैंने कहा खुदा का वास्ता है गैस ले ले ईरान से, वो देने को तैयार है। अरे मैडम क्या करें, अरे मैडम क्या करें, यू नो, ये भी तो हमारा मसला है ना, क्या करें, यू सी, हालांकि हम बहुत कुछ कर सकते हैं, लेकिन so what I'm trying to say is that Iran, because of an education, 98% literacy, 87 million population, ठीक है ना जी, औरतें उनकी educated हैं, every other person is a PhD or something, you know, universities, more than 200 universities and technology parks, so the knowledge based industry is quite advanced. I mean, I'm not saying they're on par with the United States, या वो यूरोप के साथ है, लेकिन you know, given this region, I think they're doing very, very well, given the circumstances they are in. And the Americans know this. The Saudis know it. The Saudis may have the money, but they don't have the knowledge the way the Iranians do. Their pharmaceuticals, the Iranian aspirin is as good as the aspirin that you buy anywhere else. So, you know, वो देख रहे हैं कि असल threat तो ये है. अगर इनके पास पावर आ गई ज़्यादा, तो फिर तो ना इजराइल रहेगा, ना ये the whole नक्शा और whole the makeup of the Middle East and Gulf will change. और ईरान का पड़ोसी कौन है? वो हम हैं. So you see, it is all interconnected, and I think that we have to connect the dots somehow. That, you know, Israel will not stop at Gaza. Israel, even if it bombs Hamas into obliteration, it bombs Hezbollah into obliteration, it will still keep moving ahead. It will find some pretext or the other, and we have to be wary of that. And the Arabs may know it, but they don't have the capacity to fight it, you see. I mean, Iran has the capacity. Iran can fight a war. आज वो मैं सुन रही थी कि wars are not only on the war gaming सिर्फ नहीं होती, battlefield पे नहीं होता. The wars are in different their narratives, and they are, you know, on the intellectual, and so Iran can match the West and the Israelis on that. And after Iran, I mean, although we are in dire straits, so can we. I mean, we have that potential. We have that capacity. We don't recognize it because we are involved in so many of our own maslas. But I think that Pakistan and Iran are two entities which really disturb Israel. And we have to know that. And we have to understand that Israel is an expansionist power. It's a colonial power. It's colonizing. उसका ये सोच नहीं है कि बस इधर मैं रुक जाऊंगा और बस सब ठीक हो जाएगा, और इसराइल अगर सऊदी अरबिया के साथ भी मेरे ताल्लुकात अच्छे हो गए तो बहुत अच्छा है. नो, इट विल मूव अहेड. एंड यूएस का वो चल रहा है उसका गठजोड़, बिकॉज यू नो यूएस इसी तरीके से यूएस का भी कंट्रोल इधर हो जाएगा, चाइना भी जो है ना उसकी कंटेनमेंट हो जाएगी. दिस इज ऑल अ वेरी वेरी बिग पिक्चर, बट दिस इज द वे आई सी इट. आई सी दैट इकोनॉमिकली एंड पोलिटिकली, स्ट्रेटेजिकली, इनका फोकस ये है कि फारस को, इस रीजन को, अरब और अजम का जो है डिवीजन वाइडर करें और अजम को काबू करने की कोशिश करें, क्योंकि अरबों को तो वो काबू कर लेंगे. दिस इज व्हाट माय टेक. थैंक यू. Well, I was being a bit diplomatic.
Ambassador Rifat Masood, thank you very much. These were very interesting comments. I would, you know, the number of things that you pointed out with regard to the level of education in Iran and the universities there, which was frankly not to my knowledge. I mean, this is addition to knowledge because you served there and you observed everything, and that's, I don't know, I mean, in the Foreign Office also, these issues in our meetings of the additional secretary with the foreign minister or the foreign secretary, this Iranian level of education and the way they are has not come to our knowledge or has not been pointed out.
Don't forget, sir, कि इकबाल ने कहा था कि सूरज क्या मशरक से निकलेगा, तो वो वक्त आ रहा है। क्या पता मशरक
Let's keep
चाइना है
our
या
let
कौन सा मशरक है, लेकिन है
let's
मशरक।
keep our fingers crossed. But many of us are in the exit lounge, so we not be here. But दूसरा जो है, जो आपने कहा कि थ्रेट जो इजराइल को है वो अरब स्टेट से नहीं है. इजराइल इज ए प्रोटेजे ऑफ द यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स, एंड एज लॉन्ग एज दे एंजॉय सपोर्ट in the Congress and the Senate, and APAC is so influential that anybody opposing them cannot win an election in the United States. तो वो situation change नहीं होगी, और they work hand in hand with each other. तो उसमें जो आपने बात की है वो बड़ी वो है, that Iran has survived despite sanctions. लेकिन दूसरी बात जो खटकती है वेस्ट को वो ये है कि इट्स अ रिलीजियस रिजीम, और उनके साथ अब तालिबान आ गए हैं, वो भी उसी कैटेगरी में है. तो और तीसरी बात जो मैं समझता हूँ कि अमेरिका का एज रिगार्ड्स पाकिस्तान, ईरान का तो न्यूक्लियर प्रोग्राम इजराइल उनके लिए है, बट हमारा भी न्यूक्लियर प्रोग्राम जो है दैट इज द फर्स्ट प्रायोरिटी. वो बात अब कंट्रोल है, लेकिन फिर भी उनके जहन में है. तो आई थिंक दीज आर इश्यूज. May I ask Ambassador Tasneem Aslam, you did.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I've benefited a lot from the other presentations, and some very important aspects have been touched upon and discussed. Let me start by the origin of this present conflict. Why did Hamas do it? It's not all of a sudden they got up one day and they decided they would do it. It's the persistent, long-term humiliation that the Palestinians have been, and probably how the persecution and humiliation and torture of Palestinians increased since the beginning of 2023, this year, both in West Bank and Gaza, perhaps to provoke them or to push them to that level of desperation that they would do something, because Israel was the next stage of the expansion of the state of Israel was envisaged around this period. Egypt says, and it has been confirmed by the US also, had warned the Israeli government that Hamas was planning something and watch out. But instead of being on high alert, which they normally are, there was absolutely no focus. And Hamas was walked into, I won't say it was a trap, because they were doing something out of desperation. They had to do it for a number of reasons. One, what was happening to the Palestinians. Two, the imminent recognition of Israel by a number of, as according to Netanyahu, 6 or 7 Muslim countries en bloc. And at the UN in September, Netanyahu showed a map which in which there was no Palestine. There were no Palestinians. Israel was bordering on the with the Arab countries. So exactly. So for them, they knew that if that happened, then they, even if they are butchered, they are thrown out, they are thrown in the sea, nobody would care. So they wanted to preempt that also, and perhaps Iran as well. That recognition, number one, and number two, the situation. And Israelis, knowingly having this information that it could happen, they allowed them to undertake it, allowed that music festival that was going on, while the Israeli government had the information, they gave permission for this festival, music festival, stating that there was no danger, so that Hamas could um,
Stage this attack.
not stage, because Hamas was doing it. They were not doing it. I don't believe in the conspiracy theory that they were doing it in connivance with Israel. But a lot of people at that festival were killed in the crossfire. There are videos that Hamas has, but it has been blamed on Hamas so that Israel could do what it had planned to do. And I do not think that there is going to be any two-state solution. Um, Massacre Palestinian, force them to an extent, and pressurize Egypt to accept them in Sinai. Till date, Egypt is resisting. But when the Americans start pushing, probably they would agree. They would be their. It's a very economy in a very difficult position, so they might get some billions and compromise. Exactly. So it's not going to stop there, and that is not the final stop. Then they would start Golan Heights and other places. They're already claiming that they would go further. So that is the plan or the situation. And whether Iran gets involved or not, uh, it is going to be the next target. The US, right after 7th October, started placing additional military assets in UAE and in the surrounding areas, Arabian Sea as well. So what is it for? Tomorrow there might be another attack, something, and then they can link it to Iran, and Iran can be a target. Um, there was a question on what it has done to the US. I think US has not. While I agree with Air Vice Marshal Shehzad Chaudhry Saab that US is outsourcing to these regional powers, that it is hosting itself, Israel in the Middle East, India in South Asia, and probably Southeast Asia as well. It has named Asia Pacific as Indo Pacific. India is now a big power, fifth largest economy, member of G20, and quite influential. And India, like Israel, not to that extent, but it is on the way. It gets away with with everything. But having said that, what is happening now in Gaza and the images that are coming out has really woken up the conscience of peoples around the world, not governments. Governments, Saudis, Egyptians, Jordanians, they all want Hamas dead and gone. And by the way, Hamas is not a non-state actor. Somebody said that somebody said that it's a non-state actor. It is not. It is an elected government of both West Bank and Gaza. And again, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Jordan, US, Israel, they got together and they threw them out and handed over power to PLO, which is their lackey, as everyone knows. So despite all that, the images that have come out, the demonstration, the size of demonstrations that have been taking. By the way, there was a very large pro-Israel demonstration yesterday, but it reminded me of political party in Pakistan. The participants were paid $250 each to attend, and it was from all over the world, all over the United States, while the demonstrations that are taking place in favor of Palestine are spontaneous. Every city is people are teeming, millions are coming out, and it has undermined the credibility of the United States as the power, dominant power in the world. It has created further fissures within the US society where there were already now it's not just the Muslims, Arabs or Muslims. It's the Latinos, it's the African Americans, it's the Orthodox Jews, it's the younger Jews generally who are all coming out against the US policy. And Biden administration and the Democratic Party, although both the parties, in order to retain the support of American Jewish, I wouldn't call them Jewish, I prefer the term Zionist lobbies, because they are themselves Zionists, these politicians. Of support of the powerful Zionist lobby, they they have been trying to outdo each other. But the shameless way in which Biden has parroted the absurd Israeli narrative, 40 beheaded babies and raping of women and other being said, and even justifying the attack on hospitals in the Gaza Strip, it has not done US a favor. Um, State Department officials were the first one to write a memo against this policy. There was, I think, one or two resignations as well. Then the US said, followed by 40 agencies of the US writing, government agencies, writing very critical memos to the Biden administration, opposing this policy and protesting. So that is, I don't know if since Vietnam, this kind of opposition to US policy has ever happened. Same is the case with the Europeans. If you look at what Macron said the first day, and what he's saying now, it's not out of any, it's not that his conscience that all of a sudden, it is the public pressure. It is how the people are, and what is happening in the UK, the Home Secretary, that crazy woman, was fired. And by the way, she has attacked Rishi Sunak. She's in a very nasty letter. So in this situation, I think the U.S. has not done itself any favor. The Democratic Biden administration, 80% of Democrats are opposed to this kind of support to Israel. And obviously, the images of dying children are touching for everyone. And this damage is going to be long term. It's not, because it has undermined the US narrative about democracy and human rights and freedom of expression and all that. The plank on which the US stood and opposed Russia, the Soviet Union first, and now China. Exactly. So that stands exposed not just to the world, people around the world by and large knew, but to the US public as well. So this is your question was that what has it done to the US diplomacy? I think it has damaged, and obviously it's an elephant which will take a long time to die, but the natural process of the rise and fall of a country or civilization or power is already in motion. If you look at other developments within the United States, you can know the homeless people, the breaking down of infrastructure, and it is already, and very, very cantankerous debate between various groups in the US, the African Americans, the Latinos, and right and left divide that is also, it's bordering on berserk, some of the policies about gender and all that. So it is that process has started, and then there is a desperation to stop China also. Although I think while China is an economic giant, a superpower, China has yet to learn the ropes on how to take the political lead. They, they, their reliance is on economic diplomacy and economic outreach. It's not so much on, because in this crisis, while China is working with the developing countries, China has not taken the lead. It was an opportunity for China. uh, Now it is also a very large contributor to the UN system. Yet China has not leveraged that or taken the lead on a crisis like this, or even on Ukraine. China takes a back seat, or it prefers to work along with the G77 or what is called the Global South. It doesn't assert. So in the near future, the U.S. Because by virtue of China's reluctance to assume the role, the US will continue in that role. Um, there are also some signs of US desperation. It withdrew from Afghanistan and said that nobody should recognize this regime because it's not legitimate. As our Prime Minister says.
Prime Minister कह दिया,
हाँ,
कह दिया.
हाँ, वो तो he's like, so but if you wonder how Afghanistan is undertaking these huge infrastructure projects, and in the process they're also creating rifts with their neighbors, with Iran and with Pakistan. The water project, the canal and the dams and
Uzbekistan.
yes, exactly. So who is financing this? If you don't believe the reports that every month $45 million are brought in, then just look at the cigar reports. They are public reports. How many billion? 2.5 billion has been given to the Taliban regime by the. But you also see that their funds are frozen. So these are not bank transfer, these are the cash is brought in. So that they have the hold. And now these educated, suave Taliban know how to play. What they have allowed the Chinese to come in. And by the way, a different route, an alternate route to CPEC is being constructed. The Iranians have already from Wakhan, that side China is doing,
But here from
but Iran has from Chabahar to inside Afghanistan, they have already built the infrastructure. So before the tours of US ambassador to Gwadar and Gilgit-Baltistan end, Chinese would have uh, connected that alternate route. So again, the US wants to have a hold there. Another thing that I heard about, it's not confirmed, but I heard it from military sources that Pakistan has always been under CENTCOM. CENTCOM has dealt with Pakistan, but the state of Jammu and Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan now been placed under Asia Pacific Command. It is very, it is Gilgit-Baltistan and Kashmir. It is very significant because it gives you an indication there's going to be another front that will open. And this is also economic track domestically, or for Egypt to remain in good books of the US, etc. How they have compromised. This was a litmus test and they have failed. Um, the Arab League, I'm sure you've read about it, that Arab League summit, which was supposed to precede the OIC summit, could not take place because there were very deep divisions. Some countries like Algeria, Tunisia, Qatar, um, Yemen, Syria were asking countries to break diplomatic relations. Israel, for countries like Turkey to stop the supply of oil, it was from there, and vegetables and other things. And these countries were not willing to do that. So they decided to hold the OIC summit, merge the Arab League summit, so that in the larger summit they would be able to have their say. Obviously, Iran and others brought those demands, but because the majority did not want to disturb the roadmap of Abraham Accord and subsequent understandings, it was there was nothing. It was such a toothless outcome that it will only encourage Israel to move after the completion of this phase to the next phase and to the next phase. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Tasneem Aslam. I think you raised some very important points. This I had read in the papers also that Egypt had warned, Israel. So this gives strength to the perspective that Israel may have been wanting this to happen so that it could eliminate. Yeah, yeah. And again, Netanyahu showing the map, audacity to show the map in the UN, So all these things, of course, the creation of Hamas was by Israel. They wanted to divide the strengths of Yasser Arafat. Yeah. So these things come back to haunt you. So let's see what happens. Yeah, PLO has been weakened, there's no doubt. But the other factor important is the demonstrations all over the world. To what and in America, because they've been.
The press conference about 300 years of Western hegemony coming to an end. He actually said this. So the French are also, because पहले तो सब खामोश थे ना, वो फिर बस सड़कों पर लोग आए. They tried to stop that. ये कहना by the French president in 300 years. Europe Western matters, but I'm not too sure what. Yes.
So we've taxed Jaspal's patient to the height. So I apologize for that, but in a discussion like.
The rejected demands were, and they're very interesting to hear, to prevent the transfer of US military equipment to Israel from US bases in the region. They demanded to freeze all diplomatic and economic contact with Israel, to threaten to use oil as a means of leverage, to bar flights to and from Israel through the Arab states airspace, and to dispatch a joint delegation to the US, Europe, and Russia to push for a ceasefire. The countries that rejected these demands were, again interesting, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, Sudan, Morocco, Mauritania, Djibouti, Jordan, and Egypt.
So that बिल्कुल मेरे पास तो जसपाल साहब, my apologies.
No, thank you.
It was not.
I think
7-8 minutes.
So
if the diplomats speak 15-20 minutes, professors speak 1 hour. Because I am paid for speaking in my profession. in my profession. No, thank you. I will try to limit myself within the time because all the things have been said, and I concur with all the point of views. So that's why there's no difference there. 2-3 things which are important to understand. We have seen that in the 21st century or in the beginning of this century, asymmetrical warfare, a stronger party like Russia, earlier, or the Americans were made to withdraw. But we have also not we do not forget what happened in with the Tamils in Sri Lanka, what happens with the Kashmiris in India after the revoking of, and what is happening with the Hamas. So it means that if the state decides within the state, it go for butchering or genocide of the adversaries, nobody cares. This is the thing which we are seeing in this context. So it's not very easy to understand. Yes, idea will live, but this idea will be crushed by force. And maybe, and Israelis need the territory, the settlements and all these, and it's geostrategically very significant place if you can focus on it. So that is the first point which we have to take into account. Number two is Hamas in the West is already declared as a non-state, not as a terrorist organization. Also, many and yes, it's not a non-elected, but on the other side, is Hamas is attractive for the Iranians? Is Sunnis, you can say, organization for tactically, yes, not strategically. Is it attractive for the Syrians? Maybe tactically, not strategically. Same is with the rest, including MBS. So this is the second point. And what the Israel is doing, directly or indirectly, it is serving their interest as well. Because Hamas connection with the what you call it, Qatar was in a blockade of the Saudis for a longer time. So coming back to this, so we can not ignore these realities. Emotions are on the other side. And the third is, yes, we have seen that the public conscience is very much high in the West, but the Western democratic governments very comfortably supporting the Israel. That also narrates us that how much public has an impact on the policymakers, especially on the foreign policymakers. And we have seen here in our country also how much our public demonstrations have an impact and how we handle them. So this is the third point. So too much focusing on this narrative, I think it will be not going to serve uh, the answer the question. Now, coming towards this Middle East, I think that without the Americans, Middle Eastern states cannot resolve their interests. But interestingly, in this context, Chinese policy is very clear. If you see China's four initiatives, I mean, starting first BRI and then these three initiatives last year, in the Global Security Initiative, within that, the document which was released in February 2023, there's a full paragraph on Middle East and two states solution with the dialogue. So Chinese are presenting themselves as a, you can say, peacemaker. They did in the March. They are planning for that. And apart from that, don't ignore Chinese and the Israelis' own cooperation. There are many think tanks and many things are working together with the Chinese as well. So Chinese are not very much inclusive. And going for Hamas, supporting Hamas means that indirectly Sunni Wahhabism you are going to support within your own state tomorrow. So that there is a problem for the Chinese also coming up. I was expecting from the Russians, but because Russia has two bases in the naval harbors in the Syria, and in 2020 they signed an agreement with the Sudan, and after that civil war started for the similar kind of the naval base. So Russians may, but maybe the Russians don't have a potential. They are already in the Ukraine, and in the small what they expect from Hamas, Hamas expect from them is small, you can say, weapons in this kind of asymmetrical warfare. Do the Russians have it? From where they can provide? Because Russians themselves are purchasing the drones from different countries, and whatever the weaponry they required, they were already exhausted or finished. So that is the point of the Russian. Yeah, and I think it's not a wrong thing. All military-industrial complex do this the same thing. A Russian diplomat came to my office last week, and he raised the same question. And I told him that when the Kalashnikov was sold in the Egypt and coming back in the Afghanistan, why you were producing in order to finance your economy. So if we can do it, I don't mind it. But it's now journalists have know it better it because was a part of these kind of the games. Though Anyway, coming back to us, this is that in the Middle East, 400 billion strategic partnership with Iran. Chinese wanted to intervene, what we call it, Shatiak or whatever you can call it. In this context, we cannot ignore the Russians and the Chinese are on the same page, and Americans, they have come. We started looking the American scholarship. We find that they started admitting then that the United States is not a sole superpower but a preeminent power. And with the pivot Asia, we started feeling that Americans have now left. But with the I2U2, this new Western Quad, there that means that they are back. And in that context, if you see, India supported the Israel very clearly, and the UAE is still very thick with it. So this blocking is there. So how this block will be curtailed or checked by the Chinese? I think economically they move, but the Chinese are only expressing their, you can say, firmness in the South China Sea. That is one thing. Maybe Gaza is a relief for them because there was some kind of a conflict brewing in the Philippines and China in the South China Sea. So that way, for the time being, they are start looking. And the final, my point is here that on 23rd October 2023, the Congress released this, what they call it, a strategic posture of the United States. And it was same a continuity of the four documents which were released in last year, October 2022. And if you read that document, they are looking China number one, strategic competitor, Russia number two, and then they start exporting a sort of thing. So in this context, I think the Americans coming back, crushing Hamas type of a organization is also now a signal to the other states that whatever the groups there are, if you crush, nobody can bother. And finally, in this context, how I'm just looking and I ask the students also this thing. Normally, our religious political parties take a big show on this Palestine or this kind of a thing. This time, demonstrations are not in Pakistan the way they are in the West. If you just see, except on the Jummah prayer after, you will find something, or Mulana Sahib has gone and coming back. Apart from that, I think Pakistanis are least concerned, and maybe we are too much focused on the other side. And my final point in this context is that Iranian already have been said, and I think Ambassador Sahib has very correctly pointed out. But the final point here is that where we are, day before yesterday, look, I happened to be there. There was a senior Chinese scholar, Victor, who was reported yesterday also in the Dawn. What he was saying, he was giving us that don't think that whether you will go with us or with the Americans, put your own house in order. So the Chinese, and that was coming from him, was that he was trying to prove that this Graham Harrison's book thesis is wrong because we are in a nuclear war era. But we have to also not forget every state is increasing the nuclear capability. Every state modernizing, new generation of weapons are coming. So, but here one point in the nuclear finally, it's very interesting in this Gaza conflict. First time Israeli cabinet member used the word to use the nuclear weapon. Earlier, they laugh, they say not. This is important in the domain of strategy and signal. The reason is normally this kind of a movement can survive with the political military support from the neighborhood. They threaten first, if you can come this Hezbollah, we make the same strikes on the Beirut. They started with the striking of the at the Damascus airport, not this kind of a target. So that's why, and they signal the nuclear. The signaling of the nuclear is more than enough for the Middle Eastern. Rest is whatever audit said. I concur. Thank you.
Or is it a way just to regain the authority, the way the US had this authority until 10 years ago.
My understanding is America in their authority with a different approach. And their approach is, once again, alliances building and partnership, which is written in their documents also. They started, I still recall in May, when the President Biden made a speech, he said to Finlandization of the Europe, and he got the NATOization of the Europe. It was when the Finland and the Sweden apply for the this membership of the NATO. Americans have regained, because in Europe, pan-Europeanism, Brexit, bilaterals, and the European same is case. They came in the Middle Eastern context. We were looking that the Iran was on the other side. The Saudis were trying to play their games. Saudis are dying for nuclear fuel cycle. For this, in order to be